Good morning, folks. This is Ryan Velasquez, and you're listening to the Front Row Podcast on frontrowreservation.com. It is Tuesday, September 27th, 2016. It is currently 7:39 a.m. on the East Coast. I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep. I woke up about an hour ago, went to the kitchen to make some coffee, only to discover that I'm all out. So if this podcast goes off the rails, you'll know why. We've got we've got plenty to talk about today. Going to talk about Les Miles getting canned at LSU in September, no less. Going to talk about Bill Belichick winning another game with another quarterback, and why it's stupid to somehow use that as a reason to justify calling Tom Brady a system quarterback, like that's some kind of an insult. I'm going to talk about some of the early lines for the weekend in college football. Going to talk about the Gamecocks and the Broncos. But I want to open up this show by talking about our strange and oftentimes disturbing obsession with conflict. Not the good kind of conflict, mind you. I'm not talking about the spirit of competition or the fictional realm of conflict or anything along those lines. I imagine there wouldn't be a whole lot of good TV movies or novels without conflict involved somehow. You probably wouldn't sell many copies of I woke up, had a good day, got some breakfast, went to work, got some lunch, came home, fell asleep, did it all again the next day, and just kept doing it. And it was great. And nothing else happened. Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way that we, in this case, the mass media, glamorize blatant and unhealthy hostility in the way that we saw this weekend in the build-up for the Giants matchup with the Redskins. We saw the exact same thing going into last night's debate. I did not watch because I'm not going to vote for either candidate, but all the build-up going into it was about how ugly it was going to be, how those gloves were coming off, which based on the reaction on Facebook and Twitter, it sounds like that's exactly what happened. But the point is that build-up, and I'll go back to the Giants and the Redskins now. I'm not sure how many of y'all paid attention to the advertising for that particular matchup, especially Sunday morning, but it was the first time that we get to see Odell Beckham face off against Josh Norman, since Josh Norman joined the Redskins in the offseason. And obviously, going back to last season, that kind of took center stage when the Panthers played the Giants. The way those two went back and forth, oftentimes, and like I said, an unhealthy, blatantly hostile, unhealthy way. And at the time when it happened, all we could do was talk about how awful it was for the sport, how classless those two were, just how awful for the children. What are they going to do after watching that? Just all of that same charade that we do, which was pretty accurate. Throughout that matchup, you had helmet-to-helmet hits, yanking each other by the face mask. Focus turned away from the actual game. And so even though it was, probably oftentimes fake outrage, there were a lot of good points made as far as just how bad that was for an otherwise competitive game. But that takes us about, what was it, like 9 months later now, and it's not just being promoted. It's one thing to talk about it. Obviously, that's a storyline going into the game. But it wasn't just promoted. It was, painted as two boxers. Just like a headline fight. It was ridiculous. Just the way they thought, we've been waiting for this one. the gloves are coming off between these two. So much hate. Oh, it's going to be, just awful and great. But make sure you watch it because we're going to make a whole reel in tons of ratings because you do. That's what I'm talking about today. It's just so, I wish more of us would take notice of how that game works. How quickly something goes from being outrageous and classless and horrible for the game and however you want to paint that picture to you can't miss it because it's going to be so ugly and it's going to be great just when the opportunity to make a penny off of it arises. And every single network that I saw during the build-up on Sunday just went all in on that aspect of it. Just dove head first, no shame whatsoever. Again, they were promoting it like a boxing match. Just all this bad blood, and it wasn't even about the game anymore. It was about what awful thing are these two guys going to do to each other? Are they going to get in a fight on the field? Are they going to slam helmets together? It's going to be awful. But make sure you watch it because we are going to have the whole thing on, and we can make millions of dollars off of it. Just can't wait. I mean, I understand promoting your product. That's what I do on here all the time. But when you're cashing in on the concept of two professionals potentially creating a sideshow for what's supposed to be a team matchup, an unhealthy sideshow, and just bringing out the worst of what we see in that sport at the moment, when that's what you're going all in on, we got a problem there, which is exactly what we did with the debate too. It wasn't, we can't wait to see these two talk about serious topics that are facing our nation right now. It's not like we got, just a handful of those lying around or anything. It had nothing to do with that at all. It was everything about, the gloves are coming off. That's the phrase I keep going with, I guess. It's going to be ugly. They're going to be throwing punches left and right. It's going to be great TV. And it's just, again, I understand promoting what it is you're trying to sell. But when the focus is on selling nastiness, unhealthy, unproductive, just hostility, it's time to go back to the drawing board and really re-examine what it is we're trying to do here. It's just I understand it, but it's really sad, and not kind of paints a picture of where we are at the moment in sports and in the real life. But we're gonna get out of that depressing topic and move on to our old buddy Les Miles getting the boot down at LSU. I was against this move back in January, when it looked like he was probably going to be on his way out at the end of last season. I thought it was a knee-jerk move, given how much he's won there. He's got 7 10-win seasons during his career at LSU, 2 SEC titles, 2 national championship appearances, 1 win, career record of 114-34. Those are pretty good numbers. Not a whole lot of guys have done that at big programs. So I wasn't behind it then, but I've kind of come around. I've kind of, after the news broke on Sunday that he was on his way out, I was kind of like, that sounds about right. It probably seems like the right time. Not because he's not capable of winning games. Obviously, you win 114 and you lose 34, you're doing okay. And I'm sure he'll get hired immediately if he wants to stay in a head coaching role in college football. But the biggest problem that was just on full display for that program all throughout this first month was just an inability to adapt to the way offense is played in college football today. you just didn't see even the slightest bit of change over the past couple of seasons, and that he didn't take the hint and make some adjustments during the off season, and try to embrace a little bit more emphasis on the offensive side of the football. That kind of sealed things for me. That he just simply wasn't aware, didn't care, what have you. Just ignored the way that the culture has changed, and that had gotten to the point that it was debilitating this program too much, in spite of an incredible level of talent down there. So it makes sense to me. I think it's the right move for both parties, and it's going to make the off-season coaching search a hell of a lot more fun with that gig opened up. I imagine Tom Herman is the first name that comes to mind for most of y'all out there. I'm sure Jimbo Fisher's name will get thrown around. Maybe Art Briles will get back in the mix. You got the chance that maybe they go after Lane Kiffin. I mean, even look at Alabama, grounded pound, traditional, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Alabama. Look at the way they chuck the football around now. They still got all those running backs, but look at what Kiffin's done with that offense. And Les had to make some changes, and he just refused to. You gotta, at some point that becomes a problem. You got to let the guy go, even if you do have to pay him $9 million over the next 6 years. That's just the price you got to pay. Lane Kiffin might be a name to watch on that one too. Keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on our old buddy Bobby Petrino too, up there at Louisville. You can never really rule him out. Loyalty is not his highest priority, but it is business. So, that was kind of that stole the show in the wake of another good day of college football. And on the NFL side of things, I talked a couple weeks ago about how there's no question anymore that Belichick is the greatest of all time, that he has no close second as far as current head coaches are concerned. We can talk about it from a historical standpoint, I'm sure, all day. But as far as today's NFL and today's active coaches are concerned, there's really nobody that's even close to being in the same category as him right now. Especially after he goes out last Thursday night and beats the Texans, who really, are very, very good still. I'm not. I'm a little nervous about the Brock Osweiler situation all of a sudden there, but defensively they're loaded. Lamar Miller has played well at running back. They had a solid offensive line, got some very good wide receivers. And the Patriots, Jacoby Brissett under center and all, just wore them out. What was the final? 27-0, I think it was. Just embarrassed them. And it just, like I said, the argument's over. I think from a historical perspective, he's 3-0 now with two different backup quarterbacks. He's looking at having to use another one this week because Brissett's got a thumb injury. Doesn't sound like he's going to go. Brady's got another week before he comes back. Jimmy Garoppolo's out. I imagine if he were to, they haven't released the line for the game against the Bills yet, at least not where I've seen it anyway. But I imagine he could throw Julian Edelman out there under center, and they'd probably still be favored by about 2 or 3 points at home. Enjoy it, people. I don't care if you like the Patriots or not, but if you don't appreciate what it is that you're watching right now out of New England, then you're taking this world for granted. You're taking this game for granted. You're watching the best that's ever done it, and I don't think there's even a discussion about that anymore. The one discussion, though, that really just I can't even begin to wrap my mind around when it comes to the Patriots is that the way that Bill has been able to win with Garoppolo and Brissett this year, and somehow trying to take it back to '08 when he won 11 games with Matt Castle, that it's all somehow evidence that Tom Brady is quote unquote a system quarterback and therefore overvalued, and that it somehow takes away from all that he's achieved. I don't know how you can reach that conclusion. I guess it's just the people who hate the Patriots so much. It's just their way of somehow trying to stick it to them. Because they can't talk about them losing games, but for whatever reason, that's become a discussion again over the last few days, and it's just as cheap and tired of a debate as you're ever gonna find. I just don't know how. I don't. First of all, I don't know how you can treat that as an insult that you're a system player. I think every player we've looked at, you could bring up historically, had a specific system they excelled in the most, based on their skill set, based on their strengths and weaknesses. That there was a specific system that they worked best in, and somehow that's supposed to be a bad thing. That's supposed to take away from them succeeding. I don't understand it. Like, you look at Joe Montana played in the West Coast offense. He won 4 Super Bowls in it. Because he played in that system and no other system during that time. Are we supposed to somehow question whether he should really be considered one of the best of all time? You look at any of those guys. Should we take away from Terry Bradshaw winning 4 Super Bowls because he had one of the league's the game's best defenses of all time? It's just so stupid. Just enjoy and embrace what they've done. Take them for what they are and what stats they have and what level of success they've reached, and just leave it at that. Sure, Brady's probably, this is probably the best system suited for his skill set, but that's not, he's still got to make the throws. He's still got to go make the plays, win the games, and go through the preparation and everything else that, is involved with being a professional quarterback. You can't say that system somehow is solely responsible for, everything that he's achieved. And that's ridiculous. So, if you run into any of these morons that are trying to talk about that and spin that as some, logical reason that Brady should not be considered one of the best of all time, don't take it seriously. Don't place any merit in that whatsoever. But anyway, got another good weekend of matchups lined up for college football. Like I said, the one line that I really was interested to see was what they'd line up for the Patriots and the Bills. At the moment, it doesn't appear there is one. I might be missing it. I don't know, but I checked and I haven't seen a line yet. So keep an eye on that, though, especially depending on who New England names their starting quarterback for that one. But as far as college goes, we've got another pretty good set of matchups going into the weekend, starting Friday night. If you read my column that I posted late last night, you see where I talk about Stanford having to travel to Washington on Friday, which is a matchup that should be getting a lot more attention than it has. Washington's 4-0, just like Stanford's 3-0. They've only played 3 games. But both undefeated. Washington finally played a real team in Arizona and took them to overtime. Had to win that one in overtime. They get Stanford at home. If they win this one, then that's going to change the climate of the Pac-12 North. All of a sudden, Stanford, who just about everybody has as a top 10 team at this point, which a lot of people have Washington too, but Stanford kind of the real the major front runner coming out of the Pac-12, and they didn't look great against UCLA, so that's going to be one to keep an eye on right now. Washington's given up 2.5 points, which I was a little surprised to see them favored in that one, just simply because they haven't really played anybody. But yeah, at this point, Washington minus 2.5 at home against Stanford. The real shocker to me, and it's sad that that's the state of the Gamecocks at the moment. I'll talk a little more about that loss to Kentucky in just a minute, but the opening line for this Saturday's game against Texas A&M is Aggies minus 18, which is, to me, is incredibly generous for the way that Texas A&M is racking up offense and points. And I don't know if the sports book guys watched the Gamecocks against East Carolina last weekend, and the rate they gave up yards to those guys. If they didn't turn the ball over 3 times in the end zone, that would have been a whole different story. But A&M only minus 18 going to South Carolina. I think that is being incredibly conservative, given the way the Gamecocks are playing defense and the way they're playing offense too. So again, I'll talk about the Gamecocks loss to Kentucky in a minute. Let's see, we got Miami minus 7 at Georgia Tech, which on the road, I'm a little surprised to see that, even though Georgia Tech did not look very good against Clemson. Miami, I believe that's their first conference game of the year. They have been scoring a lot more points under Mark Richt, but minus 7 is still a little surprising for them going on the road. Right now, Michigan minus 10.5 against Wisconsin, which I thought would be a little bit closer to a touchdown, if not lower than that, given the way Wisconsin's played over the first month. I was not expecting them to go into Michigan State and manhandle them the way they did, but that's exactly what happened, and they did the same thing against LSU a few weeks earlier. So I thought that would be a little bit closer, even though it is at Michigan, but right now minus 10.5 for the Wolverines. Tennessee minus 3.5 at Georgia, which is another. I thought that'd be a little higher given how poorly Georgia played against Ole Miss over the weekend. How Nick Chubb's status is kind of up in the air at the moment, and just how I know Tennessee obviously had the incredibly slow start to Saturday's win over Florida, but given the way they played in the second half, the way they put up points, I thought this line would be a little bit higher. I know it's at Georgia, and I know the home field makes a difference, but minus 3.5 for Tennessee is a little low, lower than I thought it would be anyway. Oklahoma minus 3.5 at TCU. The Sooners have not played very well against ranked teams so far. They've gotten beat up pretty good by Houston and then Ohio State at home. I think they lost by, 20 points? TCU has really not, hasn't played. The only decent team they've played was Arkansas, and they lost at home in overtime. It was a close game, but they lost. So I'm a little surprised that they're not favored at home, but, we'll see how that one goes. Oklahoma's definitely out of the national picture, but I guess they've still got a chance to win the Big 12. And then the last one was Louisville minus 1 at Clemson, which, again, if you read my column that I posted late last night recapping the college football weekend, God knows how I feel about Clemson from a rooting perspective, but they're getting a little too overlooked going into this one. I know Louisville's scoring all kinds of points, and Lamar Jackson's great and Bobby Petrino's great and all of that. But they're going into one of the toughest places to play in a big matchup, high stakes game. And I know Clemson started kind of slow, but they started to look a lot like the team most of us expected they would be against Georgia Tech, and for them to be underdogs at home is against Louisville, who again is scoring a lot of points and playing well. But I think we're overlooking what Deshaun Watson and those guys are capable of a little too much. Watson in particular seems to always be ready to go in the big ones, and I -1 for Louisville. I think they're getting a little ahead of themselves. So those were the college lines that jumped out at me early. Like I said, the Gamecocks. I know I've talked about the importance of patience and understanding where the program is right now and all of that stuff. They're not built to win right now, and that's just the way it is. But that it doesn't make it any easier to watch what went down at Kentucky this weekend. I mean, this offense has struggled. They're young. They're still figuring things out. This defense is very thin, doesn't have a ton of talent at the top, and is incredibly, has virtually no depth at all. But given how awful Kentucky's defense has been over the course of the first 3 games, I believe they allowed opponents to score, I'm just remembering off the top of my head here, I think it was something along the lines of like 520 yards of offense per game and 44 points per game over the first 3 weeks against Florida, Southern Miss, and New Mexico State. That's what their defense had allowed against those 3 teams. And the Gamecocks go in and score 10 points and can only manage 200-odd yards of offense. Again, I know it's a process. I know there's not a whole lot of experience, but it's a little disheartening that that was as much as they could muster up against a Wildcat defense that is not particularly good. And again, we know about the defense, but it's watching that team play right now is not particularly fun, and it's only in all likelihood going to get worse here with Texas A&M, Georgia, and Tennessee lined up for 3 of the next 4 weeks. But if they can just keep developing with McElwain and the rest of those young guys on offense, and just keep recruiting every defensive prospect that they can come into contact with. If they can turn this next recruiting class into a top 10 class, then all of a sudden next year you're looking at the possibility of getting back into bowl contention. So, I mean, that's kind of the way it is right now. But long term, you gotta you gotta try to be patient. You gotta just trust in the process of establishing that foundation and do your best to overlook little things like losing to Kentucky for the 3rd year in a row in football. Fortunately, the Denver Broncos were there to bail out my my moaning and groaning on Sunday. I was cautiously optimistic that defense would be able to bail them out on the road, even though Cincinnati is obviously a very talented offensive team. What I was not expecting was for Trevor Siemian in his 3rd career start against the Bengals, who are obviously one of the more experienced teams in the AFC now, for him to go out and throw 4 touchdowns, 300-plus yards, no turnovers, I believe. I didn't write that stat down, but I don't think he turned the ball over. That was a little bit of a surprise. This run-heavy, conservative offense all of a sudden slinging it around the field against Cincinnati. That was fun to watch. I imagine Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas are happy campers now after not getting the ball for the better part of the first 2 weeks. I'll tell you, I didn't predict a playoff spot during the preseason, but if these guys keep playing like this, keep playing good defense, Siemian doesn't backslide and just melt down, these guys are going to be pretty good. They might have a chance, and depending on how New England's health is come January, it's obviously incredibly early, but depending on how that goes, keep an eye on these guys. Keep an eye. They're playing pretty well. They're well coached. They're pretty well focused. Pretty disciplined. You got Aqib Talib, who's always a threat to do something stupid in the middle of a little pushing and shoving down there on the field. But aside from that, these guys are pretty good. These guys are pretty good. So hopefully they got to play at Tampa Bay this weekend. I think the opening line they're favored by 3.5 on the road again. So we'll see how that one goes. But big win, very exciting win for the Broncos. So that's gonna do it for this edition of the Front Row Podcast. I imagine you can tell that I'm a lot more awake than I was about 30 minutes ago. But that's gonna do it for today's show. If you missed it or have not had a chance to read it, make sure you check out my college football recap column I posted late last night. I'm gonna do another one today, recapping the week in the NFL. And I'll have another one tomorrow and the day after on various topics. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a beautiful thing. It's going to be beautiful. And that's all the political talk I'm going to have on the show going forward. That's the end, I promise. Anyway, this has been the Front Row Podcast. I'm Ryan Velasquez. I will talk to you next time.